Okay. Good evening. And welcome to everyone who's joining us on the internet. We're going to go right into the book. The problem and the answer. The world, as you perceive it, cannot have been created by the Father, for the world is not as you see it. God created only the eternal, and everything you see is perishable. Here we've been talking about, for lack of better words, the human condition, and we've been talking about the two kinds of seekers for help, and we've been talking about the two kinds of help providers with all of its seeming complexities. And what's this? The world, as you perceive it, cannot have been created by the Father. Well, if you wish to be an agent for change, if you wish to be having a different kind of experience from the one you've been having, if you're tired of, quote, the human condition, unquote, then there's something you must do. And the something that you must do is to step back from the human condition. Go back to square one, as it were, which is innocence, purity. You have to be willing to step back from the problem and its complexities. It's very simple. Paul cannot hear me if he's not willing to set aside whatever complexities are confronting him, whatever hooks are engaging his reactions. In other words, he's learned that in order to deal with them, he must step back from them and join with me. It's the same with everyone. If you want to be an agent for change, if you don't like the situation you're confronted with, you must, first of all, take care of number one, you, in the sense that you are the one observing the situation, the call for correction, the call for love. And so you're the one who must move into the place where the call for correction can be responded to successfully. And that requires you, for lack of better words, to get your head on straight. And that's what we're doing here. You must step back and learn, recognize that the world, as you perceive it, cannot have been created by the Father, for the world is not as you see it. God created only the eternal, and everything you see is perishable. In order for anything to be eternal, it must be unconflicted. Conflict is disruptive and destructive of the experience of peace, the experience of singularity, the experience of innocence, the experience of purity. When you're looking unjoined with that which can provide you the experience of singularity, you cannot help but see conflict, and you cannot help but respond to it from a conflicted place within yourself. Again, God created only the eternal, and everything you see is perishable. Therefore, there must be another world, which you do not see. And we've talked extensively about this. When you look at the flowers and you see a plant, you see a product of evolution, you see something that blossoms, turns to seed, and dies, and you see a cycle occurring repetitiously over and over and over again, and you interpret it to be a material organism, a material object, subject to and governed by the laws of matter, you are not seeing God's world. Technically, you are seeing God's world, but you are insisting upon interpreting it falsely and believing your definition. And so you do not see what is real. There must be another world which you do not see. The Bible speaks of a new heaven and a new earth, which all of you, in one way or another, look forward to. There's a new heaven and a new earth, and old things shall pass away. Glory, I can't wait. Yet, this cannot be literally true, for the eternal are not recreated. To perceive anew is merely to perceive again, implying that before or in the interval, you were not perceiving at all. In other words, if you're going to ever see anything more than a material flower, or a material table, or a material tree, or a material sister or brother, you're going to have to look beyond the meanings you have been applying to them. You have to arrive at a point where you're willing to recognize that you haven't been perceiving anything at all, but pure fantasy, pure imagination. To perceive anew is merely to perceive again, implying that before or in the interval you were not perceiving at all. What then is the world that awaits your perception when you see it? This is one of the most beautiful questions that you can entertain. And it's one of the most pregnant questions that you can entertain. Because the answer is a revelation. The answer is something that happens when you let yourself have a moment of intimacy with the flower, innocent of the meanings you have projected upon it, with a desire to have it communicate to you its God-derived divine meaning. In that invitation, you open the door to actually perceive. in place of what you've called perception, which has been a matter of seeing what isn't there at all, and therefore doesn't truly constitute perceiving at all. It's a great question. What then is the world that awaits your perception when you see it? You will know when you genuinely and honestly become curious. Curious enough to bring your attention to the place where the answer can be provided. Now the same thing applies to a brother who seems problematic to you. If you want to see what's really there, then you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to abandon what you've called your perception, so that the real meaning of your brother can register with you, and thus provide yourself the experience of perceiving what is really there. Providing yourself with the experience of actual perception. Now, every loving thought that the Son of God, you, ever had is eternal. And I would tell you that every act of love that you have engaged in is eternal, whether you've been awake or not. Every loving thought that the Son of God ever had is eternal. Those which his mind perceived in this world are the world's only reality. In other words, as you've looked at the world, defining it on your own terms, and therefore have been unconscious of what the world really is, you, because you are still the Christ and can never stop being the Christ, have engaged in expressions of love, in being the movement of love. And so out of everything that you're seeing that you're not seeing clearly, and which therefore isn't real, those acts of love have been and still are the only real things that have happened. They are, relative to your experience of your perception of the world, the world's only reality. Your world's only reality. Your made-up world's only reality. Why? Because the expression of love, being the embodiment of love, isn't something any of you have ever made up. It's something which you have allowed. Something which you have allowed expression to. And thus introduced it into, so to speak, the fantasy world that you live in and are devoted to. Every loving thought that the Son of God ever had is eternal. Those which his mind perceived in this world are the world's only reality. They are still perceptions because he still believes that he is separate. Yet they are eternal because they are loving. So whether you're awake or not, you are still creating. You are still being a co-creator with the Father, because when you embody and express love, you are letting the love that God is find expression, be expressed right where you are. And being loving, they are like the Father, and therefore cannot die. The real world can actually be perceived. This is why I tell you to bring your curiosity to what is in your face. Because the real world that is there, that you're not perceiving, can be perceived without your having to die and go somewhere else. And so keep your attention where the opportunity to experience the real world, to actually perceive the real world, can happen. All that is necessary is a willingness to perceive nothing else. You see, you don't realize that you intend not to see the real world. But when you look at a flower, or you look at your brother and sister, and you use the definitions that your doctors and your scientists and your philosophers have taught you, you are choosing to look without innocent eyes. You're choosing to look through a sieve, a filter that alters your perception so that you don't see exactly what is there, and the inexact experience you're having becomes for you an exact experience, and you trust it as though it's valid. The real world can actually be perceived. All that is necessary is a willingness to perceive nothing else. Now, a willingness to perceive nothing else is what you bring into play when you look at the flower or you look at anything and you desire to have a moment or a time of intimacy with it without preconceptions, with an intellectual acceptance of the idea that it just might be God presencing himself, and therefore that it has divine meaning that is worth experiencing. That is the way you bring a willingness to perceive nothing else but what is there, what is real. All that is necessary is a willingness to perceive nothing else. For if you perceive both good and evil, you are accepting both the false and the true, and making no distinction between them. If you accept what is false and you accept what is true, and you make no distinction between them, the state of mind you're in can only be described as insanity. It is a state of mind which is incapable of being clear. It is a state of mind called confusion. And yet, although that's what you experience every day, you call it normal. And you think that you have found ways to successfully live in this state of confusion. Continuing, the ego sees some good, but never only good. That is why its perceptions are so variable. It does not reject goodness entirely, for that you could not accept. And I will say, it does not reject goodness entirely because it can't. That you could not accept. Why? Because you aren't that insane. You know the truth. You know what love is. You know what principle is. You know what life is. And if the effort was made to convince you that death is life, that hate is love, and there is no life and there is no love, you wouldn't buy it. So the ego is never quite that stark. It suggests something far less than the extreme position. And that you can live with. And so you do. It does not reject goodness entirely, for that you could not accept. But what does it do? It always adds something that is not real to the real. And what is it? The little something that it adds? It adds a bias to the perception. It adds a twist. It just biases what's real. It does not reject goodness entirely, for that you could not accept, but it always adds something that is not real to the real, thus confusing illusion and reality. For perceptions cannot be partly true. If you believe in truth and illusion, you cannot tell which is true. To establish your personal autonomy, in other words, when you got your bill of divorcement, you tried to create unlike your father. See, you provided that little bit of bias, that little bit of torque we've talked about before, that little bit of twist that makes the energy and the experience of a thing not quite what it was as the Father had made it. It causes an experience for each of you individually that distorts what it really is. To establish your personal autonomy, you tried to create unlike your father, believing what you made to be capable of being unlike him. You see? You say, the Father gave me free will. Why did he give me free will? Because he wanted me to learn how to be like him and become like him alongside him. I have free will to learn how to bring all of my skills as a divine Son of God into play and to a level of excellence on my own. That's an interesting little bit of torque. And you believe that as you develop these skills and become excellent at it, that you will actually have succeeded at creating unlike him, and thus added your gift of originality to his. And so you're all very busy developing your skills, honing your skills to be a better and better independent, autonomous authority. Yet everything in what you have made that is true, and of course that only happened when you weren't paying attention, Yet everything in what you have made that is true, like every act of love, every expression of love, every loving, mindful embrace of a brother or a sister or your world, is true and is like him and is eternal. Only this, in your fantasy world, is the real world. And perceiving only this will lead you to the real heaven, because it will make you capable of understanding it. So here we've backed off from trying to respond to the call for correction, or trying to respond to the call for love that presents itself as objectionable or unkind or hateful behavior. We're stepping back to consider what we are doing in terms of how we're using our mind. That's what each of you is called upon to do if you wish to be an agent for change, if you wish to be helpful. You must be willing to bring your attention to the only things that are the real world right here in your experience, and devote yourself by perceiving only these, and this will lead you to the real heaven, because it will make you capable of understanding it. The wish to see what is real is what opens the door for the real meaning of the flower or a brother to be communicated to you so that you understand it. Now, the perception of goodness is not knowledge, but the denial of the opposite of goodness enables you to perceive or have a condition in which opposites do not exist. When Paul is joined with me, he's not experiencing opposites. And in this place where opposites don't exist, he can be the reflection of God. He can be fulfilling the purpose of being. And it's the same with all of you. But in order to have this experience, he has to be willing to set aside his inclination to seek justice, the inclination to react to egos with a better retort than what they've dished out so far. He has to be willing to abandon the satisfaction of being a successful ego. He has to abandon the great satisfaction that he and all of you get from conflict. Because at the bottom line, you all thrive on conflict. You feel invigorated when you're in the middle of it. And you feel that you're called upon to bring a certain amount of excellence, even though it can only be ego excellence, into the picture so as to be coercive enough to bring about a solution. But what? A solution by force. And that's not healing. The perception of goodness is not knowledge, but the denial of the opposite of goodness. Going on a diet in which the opposite of goodness isn't present enables you to perceive a condition in which opposites do not exist. And this is the condition of knowledge.